Dorman Smith intervened once more, this time to plead for clemency for his friend. The plea was rejected.
On the day of the hanging in May 1948, the British ambassador in Rangoon wrote a secret telegram to Whitehall. That telegram has remained classified for nearly 50 years, until only a few months ago the Foreign Office decided to release it to a researcher on this programme. The telegram reveals that the Chief of Police told the ambassador, and I quote, "We're now virtually convinced that there was British connivance in the assassinations." The police chief cites Sir Reginald Dorman Smith as a suspect. He believed the go-between was a man from the British Council in Rangoon called Bingley. Bingley hasn't featured so far in our story, but he will now.
Soon after his arrest, Usaw, in desperation, started writing secret letters from his cell. First he wrote to Captain Vivian in code. He said he wanted to contact the tall gentleman.
Everyone got very excited because who is this tall gentleman? That was a great mystery.
Vivian, who by now was also in prison for the arms theft, strongly advised against contacting the tall gentleman. Usaw then wrote to another British accomplice, Major Henry Young. Now the police chief decided to fake a reply. The ruse was successful. Usaw now wrote a letter and addressed it to John Stuart Bingley of the British Council, who happened to be 6 foot 3 inches tall. In the letter, Usaw threatened to make disclosures which would have international repercussions. An undercover police officer, posing as a released prisoner, delivered the letter.
He went very pale, tore up the letter into little bits, and then he shouted at this person and said, get out, you see.
The police chief, Tun Hla Aung, now insisted on interrogating Bingley. Bingley was evasive and denied involvement. Tun Hla Aung was dissatisfied and requested another interview, but the new governor, Sir Hubert Rance, insisted Bingley was a victim of circumstances and should be allowed to leave. The Burmese cabinet, fearful independence might be stalled, reluctantly agreed.
My father, for a long time, had lingering doubts, and because he wasn't satisfied that he was allowed to do everything that he had wished to do.
Tun Hla Aung decided to confront Bingley one last time on his own. He found him outside the Strand Hotel in Rangoon, preparing to leave for England. The police chief carried a second letter from Usaw, even more incriminating than the first.
I took a grave risk, as advised.
I think he was trying to get Bingley to say something. That this was his last chance to get Bingley to admit.
But Bingley claimed diplomatic immunity and refused to answer the police chief's questions.
And finally he was allowed to leave, and my father said, "Don't you ever come back to Burma."
John Stuart Bingley died in 1979 in Surrey. His internal reports on the assassination don't figure in the publicly available British Council files at the Public Record Office. Like Sir Reginald Dorman Smith, Bingley was a keen supporter of Karen independence. Recently declassified documents from 1948 reveal that Sir Reginald's group, the Friends of the Burma Hill Peoples, was, according to British intelligence, involved in the armed overthrow of the government of independent Burma in support of the Karens. Many documents on this group still remain secret. But those released identify as key figures in the group two close associates of Usaw, his brother Mong Mong Ji and his defense lawyer Benjamin Vertanes. One person who knew much concerning the assassination was Aung San's close friend and secretary at the London talks, Bo Set-cha. Set-cha is now dead, but he told his story to an American journalist living in Bangkok in the 1960s.
Bo Set-cha told me that there was a very powerful group in London. These were people who, during the war, had been in the secret intelligence services. They had been involved diplomatically with Burma, militarily, and also with the Secret Service. Since that time, some of them had risen to the House of Lords. Others were very powerful in the upper reaches of the British government, but they were essentially left over from the Conservative government, and now with the new Labour government found themselves unable to act directly to influence British policy. So they had to act obliquely and in the shadows due to their determination to get revenge on Aung San and to prevent Aung San's triumphant independence for Burma.
And one other person involved in the Karen campaign who was also involved in USAW's conspiracy was Captain David Vivian. Vivian escaped from prison in Burma and went to fight with the Karens. The Times reported him killed in an ambush by the Burmese army in 1950. But we've discovered a diary of his fighting days with the Karens up till 1954, and that he returned to Britain from Thailand in 1955 with false papers under the name of John Morgan. The Foreign Office files on Vivian have been destroyed, but the index shows the British Embassy in Bangkok knew he was evading a jail sentence in Burma. While in prison in Rangoon, Vivian had exorcised the British authorities when he claimed, "Someone in England is interested in seeing me put away and not allowed to talk. If I could tell the facts, there would be a big rumpus, especially between British and Burmese." Hoping to find out more about the mystery of Captain Vivian, I travelled to Durham University to consult a file on Vivian's 1955 return in the private papers of the British Commissioner General of Southeast Asia. Sure enough, there was a file marked Vivian, but I couldn't find the documents. Instead, I found this white card.
Dr. Fuster, no document on Captain Vivian, as there should be, just this piece of paper. Why?
Because after the papers were catalogued, the members of staff of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office examined them and retained a considerable number of papers on account of their sensitivity, and these papers that you're mentioning still have residual sensitivity.
The Foreign Office confirmed initially that the papers on Captain Vivian were to remain closed until the year 2005. But just before this programme was completed, that decision was reversed and the papers released. These confirmed that Captain Vivian was indeed smuggled back to London by the British government. But they still do not tell the whole story. The Foreign Office has, in its own words, made deletions where the text remains sensitive.
So what are we to make of the assassination of Aung San? Was he really killed, as most history saw it, by USAW alone, inflamed by revenge and jealousy, who then sat and waited at home after his gunmen returned? Or was USAW led to believe by powerful people, British people, who hated Aung San and all he stood for, that he would be called on to lead the government in the crisis that would inevitably follow? We'll probably never know who really killed Aung San. Too many people are now dead, too many files still kept secret by the British government. But one thing is certain, the people of Burma have paid a high price indeed for his death.
In January 1948, Burma became independent and left the Commonwealth. Within a year, the country was plunged into civil war and the minority peoples went into revolt. These conflicts spawned the brutal dictatorship which survives to this day.
I think that if my father had lived, democracy would have worked and it would have lasted. When we lost him, we lost our chance to build up a happy, democratic Burma. But of course, second chances always come, and we have to grab them while we can.